Guys, GoHunt.com Insider is the title sponsor of this podcast. Get everything you need in one spot. Join Insider today. Find and plan your hunts more effectively than ever. Complete state coverage. See detailed information for every unit, every species, every hunt. Interactive maps. Quickly find hunts that meet your exact search criteria and explore them easily. Strategy articles, learn new things, and find hidden opportunities with exclusive articles. Species breakdowns, top trophy units are hiding in plain sight. Find them with our statistics and historical data. Another great thing about GoHunt.com Insider is they have monthly giveaways that are worth $100,000 plus a year. Each month you will automatically be entered to win gear, tags, and hunts. That is if you're an Insider member. Past prizes include a $22,000 Dall sheep hunt, 3 Red Rock precision rifles with a $21,000 value, 5 Zeiss Conquest HD binoculars with a $7,500 value. Not to mention this past July they gave away 4 hunts, an antelope hunt, 2 elk hunts, and a mule deer hunt. Join Insider today and get a $50 KUIU gift card. All you have to do is go to gohunt.com/insider, click on the blue Join Now button, use the promo code JScott at checkout, and GoHunt.com will send you a $50 KUIU gift card. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider for being the title sponsor of this podcast. Guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to have a great episode on part 2 of bow hunting elk tactics with our friend Craig Steele of Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters. Before we get to the episode, I wanted to cover a few things. As you know, GoHunt.com is the title sponsor of this podcast, and DeadeyeOutfitters.com is also a sponsor, and DeadeyeOutfitters.com is a lifestyle hunting apparel company for hunters by hunters. Deadeye Outfitters makes quality t-shirts, sweatshirts, and hats designed with hunters in mind. Go check out their website and you'll see what I mean. Use the JScott promo code and receive a 10% discount on all purchases at DeadeyeOutfitters.com. I want to thank both GoHunt.com Insider and DeadeyeOutfitters.com for their sponsorship of this podcast. I want to thank you guys, the listeners, for tuning in. I want to thank you for all the positive comments and positive ratings on iTunes. That's great. We're getting some great feedback. I want to thank you for all the comments that I've gotten through email and Facebook and Instagram messaging. I get multiple emails every day from people telling me how much they enjoy the podcast, and I just thank you for that. Guys, we've got elk season, deer season, all the 2015 fall seasons right here in front of us, and it's just going to be an exciting year. I want to just encourage you guys to get out there and spend as much time as you can and enjoy it while you can. And thank you for your support of this podcast. You can follow along at our website at jscottoutdoors.com, on our Instagram page at jscottoutdoors, my associate Dar Colburn at Dar Colburn on Instagram, our YouTube channel J Scott Outdoors, and Facebook page J Scott Outdoors. And if you'd like to send me an email, comment, or question, you can send that to jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. And let's get right to the episode. Welcome to the J Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we've got a cool episode. We're going to continue our talk about tactics for better elk hunting. With me on the show today is friend of the podcast, Craig Steele of Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters and orghunt.com. Craig, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing, Jay?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, we're creeping our way through August here and getting closer and closer to the fall hunting seasons in Arizona. And I know all across the West things are kicking off, archery deer, archery antelope, archery elk. And I got friends up hunting Dall sheep right now and stone sheep. And you know, it's 2015 fall season is right here, and I'm excited to be a part of it. How about you?
I'm excited, but you know, like anything else, you always feel like you can prepare more. So
yeah, I mean, speaking about that, I mean, it's one of those things that I don't think you could ever prepare enough. And I think at some point you just have to jump in and start going for it. I know you've been doing a lot of scouting. How's things looking out there in out there on the range.
In Arizona, it's looking well. I mean, there's a lot of older feed. Some spots got good rain. Monsoon kind of dried out, but it's looking like it's going to fire up for a couple of days. We'll see. They're calling for an upgrade in the monsoon for the end of August and September. So if that holds in through September, so if that holds true, we're all going to be swimming around in our trucks as usual. But it's looking good, man. Anytime scouting, you never feel like you prepare enough. At least me. And you wish you could have that week before the hunt, like Groundhog Day, and play it over and over again, and then be ready come the first day. But unfortunately, you only have so many days you can get out and scout and prepare. But yeah, no, it's looking good, man.
I know you've been looking for antelope, and I know you've been scouting for elk and a little bit of sheep, and these are the days that we love, and I'm anxious to get back into Arizona, and I get back at the end of this month, and I've been just fishing my brains out up here and rowing a lot of my friends down the rivers, and we've managed to catch virtually every single trout in Colorado. There's a few left, so we're going to try and clean those up here the last few days here, but things have been great. We had a pretty good green drake hatch here on the Roaring Fork River, and it was a little bit sporadic, as it always is, very, very good at times and then very sporadic. But the dry fly fishing has been good, and
what's the difference between dry fly and wet fly?
Okay, so you've got dry fly fishing, which takes place on the surface, and that's mainly where you're fishing adult insects. So with the mayflies, with the caddis, with the stoneflies, those are the ones that you actually see fluttering and flying away. As opposed to when you hear wet fly, those are usually the nymphal stage of those bugs. And those, most of the aquatic insects, 90% of their life is lived underneath the surface of the water. So for a fly fisherman, if you were just a dry fly fisherman, there are only certain times that you can catch fish on the surface, whereas 100% of the time you can always catch fish nymphing, what's called nymphing, or fishing below the surface, with the insects in their nymphal stage before they become adults. When they become adults, they either submerge and come to the surface and hatch, emerge to the surface, and then their wings dry and they fly off. And that leaves a very vulnerable time for the trout, while the insects are drying their wings on the surface of the water, to eat them. The other very vulnerable part is a lot of the insects actually come back a day or two later and lay their eggs on the surface of the water, so they're bouncing on the water, and so the trout take that time to jump up and eat them off the surface. But people that like to catch a lot of fish are probably going to be nymph fishermen and fish below the surface, because trout are always feeding on stuff below the surface because of the abundance of aquatic insects below the surface. So that's kind of a little tutorial there on wet versus dry fly.
You have me at hello.
Was that too much information? Today I want to talk about tactics for better elk hunting, and we've already covered a 5-part series in a previous episode. I want to bang through some of these tactics here, and I'm going to go off my notes here, and number 6 is use the bugle to locate. In my opinion, the bugle is an overrated call that most people abuse. I know a few of the best callers in the world with a bugle, and they will tell you most of their call-ins come by way of their cow calling. A bugle can be, now, by the way, this is a very controversial subject, so a bugle can be very effective to get a bull to sound off at a great distance. In my opinion, there are only a few guys that could blow the bugle good enough to consistently call in bulls. And when I say bulls, Craig, I mean older bulls, the type that you would want to harvest. Think of it like this. At a distance of 200 yards, you can easily distinguish a guy with a bugle or a guy throwing out cow calls. I think the guy with the bugle stands out every time. Now I can sense my email lighting up, everybody getting all
carried away and telling me how much their bugles work. But in my opinion, you will call in more bulls with a cow call than any other call. With that being said, if you're very good with your bugle, then go for it. It can sometimes be a difference in calling in a big bull or not. I want to be clear in what I'm talking about in bugling is I feel like I can pick out most hunters that bugle. I hear them, I go, that's a hunter. In my opinion, most mature elk can do the same thing. Whereas cow calling, I think even someone that's not very good at cow calling, at 150 yards, I can't tell whether it's an elk or a human. I think one of the things that people need to work on is their sequencing, either with the bugle or with the cow call, and I think that's what gives them away most of the time.
I will say that I don't think elk can tell if it's a human. Now, I will say that I don't think elk can differentiate between a bugle from a human or from an actual elk. I will say that they probably, and this is just my opinion, because I go through the same thing with coyote calling. I will say that I think elk can differentiate between, they know pretty much every other bull's bugle in that area. And so if you let off a bugle and you're an unknown to him, in my opinion, he's going to try to stay away from you. And that's just my interpretation of it. I just don't think analytically the elk can identify, hey, that's, Craig's still over there blowing on his bugle. That's just my opinion. Now, do I think that, again, going back to that, I do think they can identify, say, hey, that's not, whatever. I don't recognize that bull, because they bachelor up and all summer with the bulls, and they, right now they're doing little bull sounds, and, they know what every bull in the country, what their bugle sounds like. And that's, so I guess my thing is on the semantics of it is I think a lot of guys, I do that all the time with predator hunting, calling coyotes. I hear a lot of people say, don't use coyote sounds because they won't come. Don't howl because they won't come. When to the contrary, everything is a battle of either out in the wild of food or territory. Now, 99% of the time, in my opinion, and I think you're of the same opinion, a bull is going to want, a big bull has learned, he wants to avoid a fight. He wants to avoid unknowns. He wants to go as undetected as possible because he's getting pestered all the time. And, he has the cows. So the best thing for him to do is to avoid everybody. I will bugle to locate. I do far less bugling than I used to 10 or 15 years ago. I tend to, let's take it this way. I think everybody's looking for that roadmap or that, that 1, 2, 3, 4 step to call in that big bull. When there's a lot of feel that has to go on, there's a numerous or infinite amount of situations that has to happen. And a lot of it's feel. A lot of it's Jay Scott saying, that bull is bedded up over there, and I've been following him for 3 days, and, I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to do these soft cow calls, and I'm going to fade away, and that's going to be the most effective tactic. Whereas if you don't have that experience, you go in there and you've never called in a big bull, or you haven't followed him, or you haven't had the ability or the knowledge to, analytically basically break down and follow him by his bugle to know that that's that bull, you probably aren't going to be as effective. I've had greater success bugling bulls, and I don't let out big long bugles like I used to. It's kind of basically on the cadence of what the bull does, and it really depends. But this is very rare. I'm talking probably I do it maybe 3 or 4 times in a 2-week archery elk season. I may do this maybe 2 to 4 times, maybe. And it's typically it seems like in the afternoon when I watch a big bull go bed up with some cows, and I let him dictate the tempo. And but I don't generally let out a lot of big bugles. I'll do, if cow calls I don't feel are working, I'll do some big bull sounds. But, I don't call as much as what I used to. You probably maybe even call more than I do. It's all situational. I like to be kind of that hybrid guy that can call, cut them off, do whatever it takes to get them on the ground. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I will say a couple things. I will say that last year in Montana, my eyes were opened a little bit to bugling. The bulls were really bugling, and I was cow calling along there with Jason Hairston, and they would respond and such, but they were so into what they were doing with the guys back and forth, carrying on with each other, that actually bugling was calling in more bulls than cow calling. And I will say, on a lot of over-the-counter hunts and a lot of stuff where you're in states where you're just trying to harvest a bull, bugling is fantastic. Actually, small bulls, if you just get in there and small bulls squeal and stuff, you can call in a lot of young bulls. I'm more talking about guys that are preparing for their Arizona hunts, and in my opinion, the biggest mistake that guys make is they bugle way too much. They're not very good. And they don't sound right, and they call at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So what they end up doing is creating a worse situation than just being quiet and listening for the bulls. If they're just trying to harvest a bull, then bugle like crazy, and you'll have a 5-point, a 2-year-old bull come running in, and you can shoot him. Now, there's a guy named Danny Moore, Michael Park, Casey Brooks. They all love to bugle. They bugle a lot, and they've all killed big bulls. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but they are also very good sounding buglers. I will completely disagree with you, Craig. I believe that those elk in Arizona, in the units that get extreme amount of pressure, they learn to know what is human and what is not human. I believe that they might not recognize Craig Steele's bugle as a human, but a lot of the bugles that I hear out in the woods, they're going to go, that ain't right. And what happens is a lot of times they shut up and go the other way.
But you think analytically that bull processes it and says,
yes,
that is a human.
Yes, I believe that they recognize they've heard enough bad bugling that they go, I recognize bad sounds, I recognize bad timing, and I recognize that came from the truck that I just heard the car door slam, and they learn to attach that with human. So yes, I 100%, I've seen it too many times. I believe that they go quiet because they think that that's a human. Now, do they really grasp the concept of human? Do they really grasp the concept of it's elk season? No, but what they feel is pressure. And I think when they start feeling that pressure and they hear those sounds that aren't right and they're not at the right time, I definitely 100%, and we can roll around in the dirt about this, but I believe that people need to stop bugling as much as they do. 20 years, this will be, I think, the 21st year in the, I'll have to go back and count, but 20 plus years in the Arizona elk woods, and the number one thing one of the biggest mistakes I think people make is they bugle too much. Moving on with that, and obviously I'm not letting you get the last word. Being proficient with your cow call. The cow call can be made with a diaphragm, an open reed call, a squeeze call. Whichever call you choose to use, it is necessary to be very good at it. If you cannot consistently make nasally, good-sounding cow tones, then keep the call in your pocket. This is my opinion, okay? I think all three styles of cow calls can work with extreme effectiveness. The easiest to use, in my opinion, would be the squeeze call. The second easiest would be the open reed call, and the hardest to master would be the diaphragm. You can actually use all three at different times or at the same time to be effective on bulls. I think it's important to sound nasally. I think the sequence of the call oftentimes is what gives the hunter away. I believe the best teacher, of course, is the elk themselves. I think Steve Chappell had an audio natural elk calling CD years ago. I think it's a phenomenal resource. I believe also I really like Steve's stuff on YouTube, and I believe I've been in the field a lot with him calling bulls, and he makes very, very good sound. So I think anybody that wants to get better, I think listen to Steve Chappell, listen to some of his audio CDs and his YouTube channel. And I want to be clear that I believe most all bulls can be called in with the cow call, where I do not believe most all bulls can be called in with the bugle. So I think practice is huge. I think, throwing the diaphragm in 2 days before the season is not going to cut it. I think people need to take calling more seriously or not call at all. I think I see too often where people use calling as just, I'm just going to try this as a last resort. I probably wouldn't try it at all if it's going to be your last resort.
I think a lot of it's situational. And I think you have to have realistic sounds. I think a lot of it's situational. I think there's a lot of things that go on in the woods in a bull's little pea brain that we can't process, and that and a lot of the best callers, such as yourself and Steve and whatnot, they've been through a number of experiences that has enabled them to grasp as much knowledge as humanly possible on a species that's not us. And so it gives you an advantage on, based on your past failures and success, on when, kind of that tone or cadence that you want to let out and by feel. And that if you don't have that, there's always the anomaly out there of somebody that gets out of the truck and walks in their, quarter mile or half mile and lets out a couple hoochie mamas and just happens to catch that 400-inch bull that just broke off his cows, and he comes in. But that's an anomaly. I don't think that's you may do that once in a great while. And so I think, like anything else, you have to practice at it, and then you have to be in those situations to get better. And that's
I think, being out there with them and learning what to say and when to say it, I think that's important. I think number 8, do not cow call too loud. One of the first things that gives away, in my opinion, human elk callers is the volume of their calls. The next thing that gives away them away is their sequencing. I like to think finesse when you cow call. I like to think trying to sweet talk a bull. I don't try and be abrasive. Now, there are times when I will get abrasive and get, kind of naggy and insistent. But I think guys overall cow call too loud, and I think their sequencing is like, and just like not what you hear those cows doing. Not saying that you don't hear cows from time to time doing that, but most of the time when you hear something of that sequencing, they're on alert, they're alarmed, and they're trying to gather up their calves, and they're, like heading out of town. So I think people need to call with more finesse, with more emotion, but not necessarily as loud.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that just rake on a bite down and, or whatever, hoochie mama it to death. And it, again, there's always the anomaly, but, more likely than not, that bull's going to go the other way. The big bull. Yeah.
Number 9, try your elk calls. This is a big one. Try your elk calls in front of a friend and get some feedback. I mean, a lot of times, I've done it before with Dara. I'm like, how do you think this sounds? And I'll go, 20 yards, 50 yards, 100 yards, and he'll give me feedback. And I think we've all been in those situations where you've gone on hunts and your buddy gets out his call, whether it be turkey call, predator calling, or what, and it sounds horrible. You know it's not right. Maybe there's some great parts of the call, and Dar will be like, that doesn't sound right. That last part or the front part, or, it's too long, or you're sequencing. And I think getting good feedback, you can really learn. I think the hard part is accepting constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, you have to first you have to know what they sound like, and that's the great thing about the web. And you can go on YouTube and pick up bulls. Chris Rowe does a good job, or cows, and really get a realistic sound for them. And then you do need somebody to listen, because a lot of times your voice sounds different, just like when you hear this played back, and I'm like, man, I don't sound like that, but you actually do to other people. But since it's coming out of your mouth, with a call, it doesn't sound exactly how you may interpret it. So I definitely think that's something you have to do to get better at that.
Absolutely.
Especially before you go out in the field, because you go out in the field, and you haven't practiced and whatnot. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse.
The one thing I would add to that too is, getting constructive criticism, but knowing that everybody's going to sound a little different. What you're looking for when you're listening to a friend or you're being listened to is, how's my sequencing? Am I making any sounds that you do not hear out there? And then I think what I wanted to add to that is, you got to go into the field and call with confidence. You can't go and be shy. You can't go and not believe in your call. If you do not believe in your call, don't use it at all. You have to get to where you can be confident and use your call in certain situations to make it work for you. But if you go in, kind of shy, and you're gonna squawk the call, it's gonna hold up on you, and you're gonna walk away with your tail between your legs. You do have to have some confidence if you're going to pull the call out.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. Or else you get the shakes and whatever else and excited out there. You're not calling. I mean, it compounds, and It just makes it worse.
Number 10, while stalking, learn to cut bulls off by using the wind. One of the most successful tactics for elk hunting has been described by one of the best big bull hunters around, Randy Ulmer. He talks about learning to cut off bulls while paralleling them. The idea is to stay out to the side of a bull so the wind is in both of your faces. Parallel the bull until you can use an angle and knife in from the side. Lots of times the bulls will walk right by you. This is an extremely deadly tactic. I know, Craig, that you hedge bulls and follow bulls, and it's a very fine line, because at night they're a lot of times out in open areas, maybe by tanks out in meadows, and then as it gets light, they almost always put the wind in their nose, so that they're always going into the wind. So in the morning, if the wind's coming out of the north, they're going to be going into the wind. If it's changing, they're going to always pretty much go with the wind in their face. So the challenge is you can be behind them, both their nose is in the wind and your nose is into the wind, but you're always behind them. So what I learned from Randy years and years ago in an article that I read is, you get to the side of them, parallel them, and then at the opportune time, you have to cut in at a 45 or even a 90 and get out in front of them. But the trick is, if you get out in front of them, your wind is now going to blow to them. And it becomes a very, very fine line of paralleling those bulls, using your wind checker, and then when you think you've got an opening where you can get in front, where they're just going to, basically file right in front of you, that's the key.
Yeah. No, if I'm going to talk about one tactic out of all these now, when I was younger, I used to call a lot more, and again, the more of I've learned from other people, and including Randy and other guides I've been around, and hunters, and then on my own hunt, this tactic to me is in my personal opinion, the way I like to hunt, is probably the most deadly on big bulls. And not that you go out there and you are successful at it every time, and it takes a lot of patience, and a lot of because there may be times when you do this for 2 or 3 days before you're able to get in there and slip in on that big bull, just because of, you might have to back out because the wind changes, or you can't, the bull shut up and you can't figure out where he's at, and the wind dies down, or whatever. Usually it's typically because of the wind and have to back out. But it is very deadly. It also is one of those, like you said, if a guy gets too far, if the wind does change, it could blow that elk out of the country. So, I mean, it works both ways, but I love to use this tactic. I think it's, and there's a lot of feel by there, kind of just like calling a big bull. There's a lot of feel and a lot of experience that goes on there, and you have to have some things go your way. So, that's how I, essentially, well, not my last bull, but my last archery elk hunting unit 10. That's how I killed him. I just kept nudging around him, and then, eventually he got in a spot, and some bulls chased him up kind of by me, and I shot him at 30 yards. And it was all because, I had my buddy back there, half mile every now and again. I just told him to try to keep him bugling, and he really didn't keep him bugling. The other bulls kept him bugling, but it worked out in my favor. But playing the wind and trying to nudge him until you can get up there and get a shot, or he makes a mistake. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you have to learn by trial and error, and if it's your first hunt, then you're just going to have to go for it. And you have to know that sometimes when you're paralleling them, there's times when you're running.
Yes.
There's times when you're jogging, and then there's times when you're going very, very slow. The other thing you have to watch out when you're paralleling elk is that you don't bump into other elk that eventually spook your elk. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of a real passive aggressive. So you're real passive, you're staying out on the edge, and then all of a sudden, when your time comes, boom, you get real aggressive, you cut in there, and you get ready for your shot. And sometimes it may be a bull that you hear him bugling, you don't even know what he is, but you have to use the tactic to at least see what he is, evaluate the bull, and decide if he's something you want or not.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, going back to bump on other elk, I don't know if a lot of guys, well, I know there's a handful of guys that do it all the time that know, but there's anybody that's, hasn't been on a lot of elk hunts, understands when a big bull goes and beds with his cows that there's going to be other elk around them, and they may not have bugled their way into there, so you may not know that they're there. But anytime you have in September, when you have a bull with cows, there's going to be other elk around that herd bull, and the closer they get to bedding, the more silent they seem to get. Occasionally they do erupt, but another bull could be laying up there and really mess up your whole plans if you're not aware of your surroundings, and that there's another elk that slipped in between you and the bull and his cows. So, yeah.
Number 11, when a bull is raking its antlers, it is time to charge into bow range. This is a perfect time to travel towards the bull as quickly as possible. When you hear antlers raking against trees or brush, you should be moving. The other thing is, if you hear antlers against antlers, if they're fighting, you need to charge in there, be as aggressive as you can. Oftentimes you can walk right into bow range or closer. I've been able to get close enough to touch elk when they're thrashing trees. I would not advise touching a bull or getting so close, as you may startle them and they're going to turn on you with their antlers. But I tell people this all the time. If you hear them raking, you move. When you stop, they'll hesitate, you stop. When they go back to raking, you literally can run and make as much noise because they can't hear anything.
That's like the biggest, it's all situational. We're predators. We need to take advantage of situations like this. And that, I think for me, this is probably one of the number one headaches in hunting or guiding or helping somebody that's a novice bow hunter in this situation, is they look at me like I'm nuts when a fight, or specifically when a bull's raking a tree. You go, but you have to be very keen on when it stops. and then you
when
stop.
It stops, you stop.
You stop, but you have to go. And I get a lot of guys or a lot of people that I've helped that kind of, for lack of better terms, pussyfoot around. And there's a time to go, and then there's a time to creep. And when in this situation, when a bull starts harassing a tree, it's time to go. And especially if it's the bull you want to kill. And it's just that simple, you know. You got to be aggressive.
You got to be aggressive, and that goes to my number 12. When bulls are fighting, it's time to get aggressive. We talked about that. When you hear those antlers clanking, you absolutely need to double time it. Run at that sound, but as quickly as you're running, you need to be able to stop when they stop, and then they'll go back at it. You can make up 300 or 400 yards like that if you're keen on. As soon as you hear them clanking, you go back to running. And when I mean running, I mean going full out. And I've even run into bulls that are fighting, and there's cows all around and other small bulls. And I just continue to go right at them. Now I've got visual on them, and I continue to run at them. The other elk are running off, the whole thing, and the bulls are fighting. They're not paying attention to what the 5 Point's doing or the other cows. So you need to be, you need to get very, very aggressive when you hear the antlers clanking. I want to talk about, number 13, bed the bull during midday and stay close enough to hear him when he gets up. In my opinion, this is a killer tactic, but I do want to say that if you get close to the elk in their beds, you do run the risk of them winding you. The wind can get very inconsistent and swirly, and that is one of the hardest things to do, is to stay in there tight with them all day. But obviously with the wind right, you wait until the cows are all settled down and bedded down, ease in even closer to range. Oftentimes he'll get up throughout the couple-hour period to check his cows, for signs of being worthy to be bred, and he'll walk right into bow range. A lot of times I'll get down, I'll lay flat on the ground so to eliminate as much scent as possible, and I'll just kind of hang there. And my hunting partner, Dar Colburn, is very, very good at this. He likes to stay in there tight. He loves to crawl up on elk that are bedded and then just wait and see if an opportunity comes his way.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I've done this 2 situations, and I think first off, you need to know that you're in there on his bed. It's not something that you want to go aimlessly walking along through the woods during the middle of the day. It's different if you're walking out and you catch something bedded, but you don't want to go trying to locate something, in my opinion, during the middle of the day. If you follow that bull to where he's bedding and you got a pretty good idea, then that is a great tactic. But what I don't want to get is a bunch of guys that have never hunted before thinking, from 10 to 2, I'm going to go walk through their beds, because you will blow more elk than what you have an opportunity at. But it is deadly because, like you said, what a lot of guys don't do, and there's a lot of guys, habits are now, is to hunt from early in the morning till 10 o'clock and call it good, go back and eat lunch, and then come back out 3 to, dark and hunt. That's kind of there's a lot of habits that have been in place, instilled, I think, on the general public, because, they don't, it's hot, the bulls are bedded, they don't talk. Well, they do talk, and they do get up, just like you said, but you have to be very, very cautious on how you do it. And, a guy like Dar, who's a straight-up killer, I mean, he's been around the block or 2 and knows how to get it done in those situations. But you don't want to just walk in their bedding area during the middle of the day and just hope to get lucky on a bedded bull. You want, if you can follow a big bull to his bed and hang close to him, you can get yourself in an opportunity that may end you with you arrowing that big bull as he walks by you. So
absolutely. And I think it's important to, if you're hunting one particular elk and it's just the beginning of the season, the last thing you want to do is interrupt his pattern. So I don't want you to think, by giving you the tip of, getting in there tight with them in their beds. I think that's an aggressive tactic. I think it's a great tactic if you're just trying to harvest a bull or just harvest a nice bull. but you need to be particularly concerned if you're going after one specific elk.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want to do is blow him out of the country.
Yeah.
And so maybe the last couple days of the season, if you have to get real aggressive, then do it. But if you've patterned a bull, try not to interrupt his pattern, and definitely getting in there too close is going to interrupt his pattern. And I found once you kind of blow them out of their beds, they don't tend to go back there. And so, sometimes come the last couple days trying to fill your tag, you just got to go for it.
Yeah.
I want, let's see, number 15, if you find a fresh wallow, it usually means the bull will be back. I love to be, hedging these bulls and paralleling these bulls, and all of a sudden I come across a smoking, fresh wallow. And I can either tell that the bulls that I was just following or hedging had just been in it, or I know that I'm real close to their bed, say 150 yards, and there's this wallow and it's just tore up. Those bulls, when it gets hot, especially in Arizona, they cannot stay away from the wallows. They will go and bed their cows down, and then they will slip out to the wallow quiet, as a mouse, and they'll come and roll in that mud. And sometimes when you look at the wallows, you can look where the bull rolled around, and you'll actually see where his antlers hit the mud, and you can kind of determine where the body was in relation to where the tips of the rack or what have you are, and if it's a good bull or not. Good wallows are hard to find, but when you do, you need to pay close attention, because those elk will come back to those wallows. You can set a tree stand up above wallows, you can set a ground blind, or you can just build a ground blind, or you can just set up in a good position where, and wait for them to come back. The tricky part is the wind. They're going to approach that wallow most all the time with the wind in their face, so it becomes a bit of a challenge. That's that big bull texting you right there, Craig.
Yeah, he's telling me on September 15th I'm going to be at this wallow.
Yeah,
I think you said it right. The wind, and then is it a fresh wallow? I mean, is it like you said? Did they hit the wallow? I think a lot of guys, may. I've heard of guys, I got this wallow that they hit a lot of bulls, will really wallow a ton from when they shed their velvet until the start of September, and they'll wallow them out, 3-4 foot deep, but that's, they're getting ready to move. So you're talking about a fresh wallow in the area where you have a bull that you want to hunt, and it's being used within, a quarter to 3/4 of a mile from where you just left that bull. Right? Is that that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think a lot of guys they misinterpret sign as far as being fresh, or you know what I mean. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I can't remember who told me this one time, or who I heard. I think it was off an elk tape like 30 years ago, but the guy said, there's a difference between hunting week-old elk sign and a day-old elk sign,
Absolutely. And Craig, one of the things with that, I think, in order to determine if a wallow is fresh, is there's several things. If you get up to the wallow and where the water actually is, and if it's muddy, if it's discolored, then they've just got out of there. It's an hour or two old. If you get there and inside the actual wallow there's water and it's clear, that wallow is not that fresh. If you get to tanks, a lot of times in Arizona, all along the edges of the tanks, you can literally come up and see where there's fresh mud that has been thrown when they're wallowing, and you can actually feel it. And if it's still moist and still, not hard, then that's a pretty fresh wallow. And I think that's important. Wallows are great if they're fresh and they're really getting pounded. And you need to watch the weather if it's hot. That goes into my next point. When it's hot, water is key. When hunting rutting bulls and temperatures soar, water can be an extremely effective way to harvest a nice bull. Whether you are for or against sitting water, the point is water will be a congregating place for many herds of elk and many bulls. It often becomes the party place. Sitting in a ground blind or a tree stand during hot days can be a gold mine for hunters seeking to harvest a bull.
Yeah.
In Arizona, water is key. I mean, they have to drink every single day. and water holes and springs. Those are the first places when I draw a unit or I'm guiding a hunter in a unit. Is I want to know where all the water holes are. I want to go check them out for sign. I want to go check out and see if I can determine how many elk are using it, what time of day they're using it. If I'm picking a glassing point, a lot of times I try and pick a glassing point that I can see 2 or 3 or 4 different water sources, because that's a great place to start, especially in Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, those states where it's probably more arid.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, how many big bulls have fallen from water? I mean, I know in Arizona a ton.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to admit that I'm not a huge water sitter. Not that I'm against it. I'm just not. It has to be perfect for me. I always worry about the wind, but I know for a fact that there's a lot of big bulls that have been taken off water. I mean, it's really highly effective if if you have the patience and you get into, as you guys get with, if guys or gals have some sort of physical limitation, it's a great option. So you still can hunt elk if you can sit water, and be effective.
That brings me to my next point. At a water hole, let the elk put its head down and start drinking before you draw your bow. If you're going to sit a water hole for big bulls, a bit of advice is you've got to let them settle in and start drinking, because it seems as though they come in a lot of times and they're on edge. Or you're sitting there at the water and the cows come in first and they're on edge, and you've got to let them kind of feel comfortable where they're at. And once they come in and once that bull puts his head down, let them start sipping a little bit. A lot of times I see them after maybe 5 or 7 seconds, they'll lift their head and they'll look around. So know that, if you draw right away, as soon as they put their head down, they're probably going to catch you. Let them get in to start drinking and then draw your bow. I think that's a great tip for people.
No, I mean, I'll take it from you on that one, because again, I'm not a huge water sitter, but I just know it's effective.
Another tip is when you have a shot at a bull and he gives you another shot, take it no matter what. And elk are tough animals. Whether using a bow or a rifle, when an elk gives you a second opportunity, always take the shot. This is my opinion. Okay? Elk are extremely resilient and tough. I always tell hunters to shoot them as many times as they can until they fall. When they fall, don't celebrate until you know for certain that they're down for good. I like to save as much meat as possible, but I also don't like to lose any animal. So you need to make sure that elk is down and down for good, and he is 100% dead before you start high-fiving or doing anything. I had an example of this. I was hunting the San Carlos Indian Reservation in 2006, and I called this bull in, and he came in from right to left, and his head came under these branches, and I saw that he had a extra eye guard, and he was just a big, giant front-end bull, and he was one that I wanted to shoot, and I shot him at 10, 12, 13, 14 yards. It was really close. And he kind of turned and made kind of a loop and gave me another broadside shot on his other side, on his right side. I had already had an arrow nocked and shot him again. And it's just something that was taught to me, in that even though my first shot was perfect, he gave me another perfect opportunity, and I sent another one in there, and I'm glad I did. I harvested the bull. He scored 406, and he's a beautiful bull. But I think I see it too many times where people think they have it in the bag, and elk are tough, and you've got to make sure that they go down and they stay down.
Yeah, no, I would concur that that I've seen situations where you can worry about the meat, and this may sound bad to some people. Your due diligence is to make good shot the first time. But let's be realist on this, and if you hunt for any amount of time, you're going to make a bad shot. And or even at that, even if you think you make a good shot, if they are tough, and if you push that animal, a one lung bull can go a heck of a long ways, and or you hit a bull that's gut shot, or hit them in the liver, they can go a long ways, and by putting another arrow in them or shot on them wherever you can get it, enables you to break that animal down, and that's just, you're going to get more meat that way than by waiting and hoping that that one arrow was a liver shot, and that you're going to be able to track him up. There's not going to be any weather issues, and hopefully recover that bull and have more meat. It's a higher chance that you're going to get that bull if you get 2 arrows, 3 arrows, or whatever it may be, and you lose a little meat, then so be it. The coyotes will be a little bit happier, but if you lose that bull completely because the shot wasn't as good as what you thought it was. I mean, this, Jay, what you get by filming. I don't know how many times, because I film a lot, that I thought a shot was great or I thought a shot was bad. And then you go back and review the footage before you start tracking, and you're like, oh man, it's a little bit different than I thought it was. My bull in Utah a couple years ago, if I would have had that on film, I would have known a lot more about the shot. But things happen in slow motion, and you go in kind of that time warp phase, and things don't always play out the way you thought they did. So a second shot is always warranted, in my opinion. So
yeah, I mean, it goes to my next point. After the shot, no matter how good the shot is, I like to say, and Steve Winery, a friend of mine from Colorado, has probably seen more elk shot than anybody I know, says to give the bull at least 30 minutes no matter how good the hit. Now, if the bull falls within eyesight and you can sit there and watch him go down and he's deader than dead, that may be the only case where 30 minutes. I like to, after the shot, I like to try and document as much things as I possibly can. I connect with my hunter, or if I'm alone, I try and say, where was I when I shot? Where was the bull? I try and that's where video helps, where you can replay everything. Where was the hit? Did I see the arrow? I try and replay all that. But I think if they get one thing out of this conversation that we've been talking about today, is I think this is the most important bit of info in this whole talk. After an archery shot, no matter how good you think the hit is, you should wait at least 30 minutes before searching for your trophy. In my mind, that means before you go up to where the animal was shot, before you start looking for an arrow, anything. What I like to do is just sit right down. I like to kind of gather my thoughts, and I like to give that animal time. And 30 minutes, even on what I think are great shots, I think 30 minutes is the time. Now, if you hit a bull in the guts, I think that you should give a minimum of 6 hours. And 6 hours may be too soon. Now, people are going to maybe give me some criticism for this, but I've been on enough elk kills, and I have enough friends that shoot elk all the time. This is kind of the general consensus, is 6 hours. If you know he's gut shot, 6 hours minimum before you even start. And when you start on an elk that whether you know it's a good shot or you know it's a bad shot, you go slow. And I can't reiterate enough how slow you need to go and how aware of everything you need to be. And if you have friends that are there helping you, you need to be very clear with them that this is not time for them to be the hero and run out in front and get out of front of the party. They need to stay behind and either, use tape. Here's blood. Here's last blood. I've seen so many situations where people get antsy and they're not patient and they move too fast and they end up jumping an elk that you could have easily gotten a second shot on that wasn't already, expiring. And someone else blows them out because they want to find the bull and they're so eager, but they don't understand that being slow and cautious is very important.
I think tracking, especially after the shot in this case, is the most underrated aspect, most under talked about, and I think that there's more bulls lost in the archery woods than what we'd like to admit. I think a lot of it is because, and this is just my opinion, is because guys are converting over from rifle hunting. They don't fathom how long it takes any animal, let alone a big old bull elk, to expire, and they get caught up in the mental battle of he's dead, or I need to get another shot. Well, with a bow, that animal needs to be incapacitated. It needs to be basically getting sick. And I agree with you 100%, Jay, on every aspect. Giving a bull 6 hours if he's gut shot, on going slow.
And sometimes it's 12, Craig. If I know it's a dead-on gut shot, 6 hours is like minimum before I even go up and look at the arrow.
They are tough, man.
Yeah.
They are they are tough. They have a will to live. I mean, and yeah, so what? Let's say you happen, I'm going to air this out. Let's say you happen, I shot that bull in Utah, and I shot him in a rainstorm. I hit him back. I thought it was guts. I cussed myself because it was a poor shot. And I'm going to throw this. I have other situations that I could talk about that are guiding, but I don't want to bring,
Sure.
any of my hunters
Sure.
into. I want to talk about my own personal. So if I take heat off this, it's my own personal thing. I hit that bull back, buried it to the fletching, and when it was raining hard, and I mean everything was just soaked, it was still raining. It was one of those soakers, and I left out of there, went back down to the truck, and I knew I'd made a poor shot. I went and stuck. The only thing I did is I waited there for I tried to get another arrow on him first. But I wasn't able to get another arrow on him because of cover was blocking I was going to shoot him in the neck. I didn't care. I stuck an arrow in the ground where he stood probably 15, 20 minutes after I'd shot him. And then I just bailed out of there, went back down to the truck, and then met up with my parents. And, made the call right then and there that I was going to let that bull lay all night. It was the one of those situations where you get rain and you think you got to go on that animal because it's going to rain, it's going to wash out my tracks, that I'm going to be able to follow this animal and the blood trail. But the other option, so I had one option, was to either start on his track, even though I knew it was a poor shot and he probably wasn't going to be dead. And if he was alive, which in my mind he was, that I would probably bump him and lose him for good. Or I had the other option, and I'm playing the worst case scenario on both sides. The other option was to let him lay all night. Perhaps maybe it was a better shot than I thought. Perhaps maybe I lose a little meat. Either way.
But you recover the whole elk and get most of the meat.
Either way, both situations sucked. And it was my fault. Either way, because I made a poor shot, and they happen. I don't want to be, in this glass house here and pretend that they don't happen. They happen more times than what we talk about them because we're scared of anti-hunters or, getting a bat. They happen, and that's why I think tracking has been left out of the fundamentals of what a lot of the youth hunters know today, and why we're such piss poor trackers today, is because we're afraid to talk about this aspect. And you can tell I'm freaking like salivating over here, passionate about it, because I think it's huge. And anyway, I left that bull, and we didn't find him until noon the next day, and I was able to get some meat off of him. I lost a lot of meat, but he was dead within 15 minutes after I shot him because the way the angle of the arrow shot up in him, I didn't see that. And film would have helped me out there a ton. But I had two choices. And I think a lot of times when guys get in these situations, they rush. And then they go through, they basically kind of feel guilty because they make a poor shot. So they want to go and end this animal's life quickly. And they want to get this over quickly. And what happens is you already made a piss poor shot. That's done. That's in the past. You have to do what's best from that point forward to get the best outcome from that point forward. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I think a lot of guys rush on piss poor shots because they want to end it quicker. When it ends up being, it just compounds the problem and probably makes it even worse and doesn't end in a good result either way. So anyway.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great story, and I think people can take a lot from that. Craig, I hope that these tips help our listeners on their elk hunts this year. I want to thank you for giving your insight here. We covered a lot of ground today. There's obviously a lot more tips and tactics to cover, but that was a great 1 hour recap of some tips, and I appreciate you being on. Looking forward to the elk season. I know this year you're going to be guiding in Unit 10. I'm going to be guiding in Unit 9, and I'm just think this year's going to be a very good year. The monsoon's dried up a little bit, but I think antler growth is pretty darn good. We're going to see if it rivals 2005, which was a banner year. Even if it's not as good as 2005, it's going to be one of the best years we've had, and I'm going to say, quite a while. And I know you're looking forward to it, and I know a lot of the listeners are looking forward to it. So thanks for being on, and thanks for being a friend of the podcast, as always.
Awesome, Jay. Thank you.
All right.
Guys, I wanted to give you a quick reminder of the GoHunt.com Insider giveaway. This month of August, they're giving away 10 Kuiu sleeping bags. The value of that is $4,500. The Kuiu sleeping bags are most technically advanced sleeping bags on the market. I've been using the same exact bag they're giving away, a super down 30-degree size long for over a year now, and I love it. All you have to do is be an insider member. Each month, random names are pulled from the insider member list, and they give away awesome gear, rifles, optics, apparel, and even landowner tags. They've given away 4 landowner tags in July. They gave away a Dall sheep hunt worth $22,500 in June. So remember to sign up for GoHunt.com Insider and be a member. All you have to do is go to GoHunt.com Insider /insider, click on the blue Join Now button, use the JScott promo code, and they will also send you a $50 Kuiu gift card when you sign up. So it's a pretty good deal. Guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. Until next time, God bless you.